Okay, welcome everyone to the Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider Newsletter, and thanks for joining us today. If you are brand new to us, either here in person or watching on replay, and you want to get on our list to hear about all of our social guests as well as any other fun stuff we do, you could go to writeforkids.org/ultimate cheat sheet. You just enter your name and your email. That way we can contact you about other stuff we do, and you get a free ebook, The Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet. We are in our 30th year of business, and this compiles all of our best beginner tips from 30 years into one ebook to get started writing for kids, and that is yours. So I hope you go do that and get on our list so we can keep in touch. And if you are interested in subscribing to our newsletter, Children's Book Insider, this is the thing that started it off, and this is our 30th year of publication. writeforkids.org/CBI. We give a special $5 a month subscription price for our socialites. And you get a 20-page newsletter delivered to your inbox every month. Each issue has a special interview with either an editor or an agent who gives us an above the slush pile code. So you can submit using that code and your manuscript will jump over the slush pile and get read faster, which is always great. There's also other market information and lots of great articles in the newsletter every month. And you have full access to our Children's Book Insider membership site, which is called the CBI Clubhouse, which has lots more information on it. You can imagine in 30 years, we've accumulated a lot of stuff. You have full access to it on the CBI Clubhouse. So, writeforkids.org/CBI. Okay, we got two great celebrates this week. Karen Donaldson wrote that she wants to celebrate the fact that she's completed her middle grade novel, A Boy, a Man, and a Boat. Now she's looking for beta readers. Good job, Karen. And also on April, the new issue of Chicken Soup for the Soul is going to go on sale, and she has a story in it. So yay, Karen. Those are two great things to celebrate. Good for you, and congratulations on both of those. And Beth Stillborn. We were talking before I started the recording about our distancing social last week, where Danny Alcorn and I, we had sent out a poll because we wanted to know what your biggest obstacles were toward feeling like a successful author. And we really broke a lot of those down. And then I gave you some homework. And Beth wrote this. She says, "You got me past feeling just dragged down by all the form rejections I've been getting to making myself look at my fear of finding out why I'm not getting past forms, really looking at my writing and taking real steps to do something about it." So here's what she did. She so far has signed up for 3 webinars this month, 1 on writing and 2 on submissions, and has requested a consultation with her public library's writer in residence to get a deeper look into her writing and learn where she can improve, which is something she's been wanting to do since late 2019 and kept putting it off. And this week she did it. So Beth, good for you. Those are exemplary action steps. And I'm so glad that you are taking those external obstacles that you feel you have no control over and doing something about them and facing that fear. We talked a lot about fear last week. And that's really what a lot of these obstacles boil down to. We make excuses about what's happening, but really we're just afraid that maybe we're not good enough. And Beth is doing something about that. So good for you, Beth. And I hope you're all inspired to do the same. So I want to hear your good news. Email mail@writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line and let me know anything you want to celebrate. We are here for you, and we'll feature you on a future distancing social. Oh, we have something to celebrate. I forgot I had the slide in here. On March 18th, we're going to have an awesome webinar called The Non-Marketer's Guide to author marketing with Jennifer Vassell. Jennifer was a guest on my social about 4 weeks ago, and she was awesome. But she is just an incredible marketer, and she is going to break down how you can market if you're an introvert, a social media phobe, time crunched writer, or a reluctant marketer of any kind. She is going to tell you how to become your own best marketer. And so check your email next Monday for a special registration link, and that's when we're going to open sales, and you will get a discount because you'll be buying ahead of time. And if you're not on our list, go to that writeforkids.org/ultimate cheat sheet, get on our list so that you will get notice of the webinar, so you can register when it comes out. It will be March 18th. It will be at 6 p.m. It's a Thursday night, and it will be recorded. 6 p.m. for me, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Pacific, and we record it. So if you can't attend live, you will get the recording. Okie dokie. Links of interest. Here's one good link this week that I was sent by this agency. Stamola Literary Studio sponsors free webinars where they are just do all kinds of fun stuff. Sometimes it's for kids, sometimes it's for writers, all sorts of things. They're doing this tomorrow. It's a webinar on critique groups, what you need to know to set up a successful one, how to join one, how to be a good critiquer, how to get critiques, all the good stuff. And they are going to make a Google form available during the event. Anybody who attends live, if you want to put your information onto the form, I imagine it will be name and email. It will be shared by everyone who attends the event so that you can pair up with critique partners. So that is optional. You don't have to do that. But this is happening tomorrow. And so the registration for this, you have to register to attend. It's on this graphic, but I also put it on the right there. stimolalive.com/event/critique groups. The link above that is the Stamola Literary Studio. It's their main website in case you want to check out who this literary agency is. They represent some very, very high profile clients. This is not a way for agents to read your manuscripts. This is just a service that they are doing separate for writers to help educate them. So you'll write better. You'll be in a critique group. So that's awesome. Anyway, I just want to let you know about that. My chat box is stuck. I'm trying to drag it over so I can see it, and I can't. So I'll just close it. Hope you're not talking to me right now. Okay. Now I get to introduce my wonderful guest tonight. So Tameka Fryer-Brown has gone from medical supplies sales rep to a full-time mom to children's book author. Her picture book titles include Around Our Way on Neighbor's Day from Abrams, My Cold Plum Lemon Pie Bluesy Mood from Viking, and Brown Baby Lullaby from Farrar Straus Giroux, which was named by Parents Latina magazine as one of the best Latino children's books of 2020, and by NPR as one of their 100 favorite books for young readers. So that's amazing. She has 2 picture books under contract right now, which I'm definitely going to ask her about. Picture book biography in free verse called Shirley Chisholm, not done yet, and to be published in fall 2022 by Millbrook, and That Flag, illustrated by Nicholas Smith, which will be published in the winter of 2023 by Harper Collins. And it is the story of a pair of best friends who are divided over the meaning and significance of the Confederate flag. And she writes in just wonderful free verse and rhyme verse. And so that's really what we're going to talk a lot about tonight. So, Tameka, thank you for joining us. And I'm trying to stop sharing for a moment here so we can all see you. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And I'm going to try to, open up my chat box again so that if I can actually see it. There it is. So thank you again, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And for anybody who hasn't, who might not be aware of you, who are new to your work, I really hope everyone goes out after tonight and reads your three picture books because they are just wonderful. And there is such a sense of joy that permeates them that I just love. And a real celebration of everyday moments of family and community. Would you say that these themes are particularly important to you? And do you consciously infuse those themes into your work?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Laura, for having me here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I think it's important, both important to me and just reflective of my life experience. I grew up with very close to my extended family. Family is very important to me. I have three kids. Two, well, the youngest is 17 and the oldest is 25. The middle one is 22. So even though I'm dealing with some young adult stuff, we're still a very close family, and just
Sure.
family is just always very important to me. And so I think it's not really a conscious thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that that's my heart. It just finds itself as a thread throughout all of my work, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, and I think when I've talked to other writers about that, and a lot of times they don't even realize they're doing it. But
exactly.
there's certain values they have that just come out. They can't help it because it's what's important to them, and it's just
Exactly.
the stories that they're going to be telling. Right. Now, your books are diverse and have been labeled diverse in reviews, and in that they depict, Black and multicultural families and communities. But I always, in reading your work, I feel that they're actually very universal and very accessible to any child, to any reader.
Mhm.
Um, is it important to you to kind of strike that balance between representation and universality? I guess
Mhm.
that's the word.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that everyone can relate to your story, and yet you have that representation in the books.
You know what I think it is? I think I've more so focused on um truth. you
Hmm.
know, Depicting truth, emotional truth, and cultural truth. I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive. You
Sure.
can have cultural specificity and universality at the same time.
Sure. Hmm.
It's not really, I don't really focus on making sure I strike that balance. I
Hmm.
just more so focus on making sure that what I'm writing, the story that I'm telling, the emotional aspects of the story just really ring true, because that's where the universality comes in, right? The
Hmm.
feeling, the emotion, because even though the details of one's life might be unique and
Hmm.
specific to that culture, what we have in common is what we feel, right? We all feel joy,
Hmm.
sadness, anger, all of it. And so
Hmm.
I think that's kind of really what I focus on, just trying to be really intentional, that what the emotion that I'm trying to get on the page actually comes across to the reader. And if I'm successful at that, then I think that's where that universality will come through.
Hmm. I think that's very true, and I think you are successful at that. I want to talk about your books, and I have a couple spreads from each book that I want to share my screen and show them because you write in rhythm and rhyme, and I think it's really important to see how the words fall on the page
Mhm.
when we're discussing that.
Sure.
And also you write in free verse, so each of your books has a very distinctive rhythm and style, which I love. A lot of times when people write in rhyme, they have one style, which is great, but it's just they repeat it with every book.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about how your style and the particular rhythm fits each story,
Okay.
which I think is something that a lot of people, when they're writing in rhyme, especially when they're starting out, they don't always think about that,
Mhm.
about how the structure has to fit the story. So Let me share my screen again, and we can go. So let's see. This first one is I've got three spreads from Brown Baby Lullaby. This is actually your most recent book.
Mhm.
Um, do you want to read these out loud, or do you want me to read them? I would love people to hear the lines
Okay,
first before we start discussing it.
I'll read it. No
Okay,
problem.
great. Go for it.
Um, okay. Look, me hijo, at the sun, setting now that day is done. Moonlight's breaking, night's begun. Come, my sweet brown baby. Zoom through every open door, round the room and hit the floor. Bounce back up and zoom some more. Slow down, busy baby.
That's all I have from this book, but it's just such a great story. It's very active. Um, there are several things I want to ask you about this, but first of all, people probably noticed right away you do incorporate some Spanish words into the text,
Mhm.
and I've had this exact question from writers who want to do that. Is it okay to just drop those words in there? So clearly you did. So it's okay. Do you did you and the editor ever have a discussion about how this was going to happen, or is it something that you just from the start just did and it worked?
Actually, interesting. This is kind of an interesting story. When I first wrote this story and I sold it, um, there were no Spanish words in it.
Hmm.
But I did tell the story from a diasporic lens so that the mother was mama and the father was papi, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I had that, that diasporic two cultures in this story. And as I was going through my editorial notes and revising based on those, I'm like, well, if I'm supposed to be representing, two cultures, it only makes sense that, the other language is spoken, throughout the story, but I didn't want to include so much, not that I'm
Right.
fluent by any means, but I still didn't want to incorporate so much that it would be inaccessible to most people.
Mm-hmm.
So most, American audiences. So I sprinkled it through, and I think I'm from Miami, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I'm not fluent, I know something about the what was called when I was growing up Spanglish, right? And I
Sure.
think I just have a sensibility of how to incorporate those words. So you can't just like throw Spanish in any old kind of way. It has
Mm-hmm.
to be a way that that rings true for somebody who would speak, um, you know, based on their background, they would kind of combine those
Mm-hmm.
languages and how they would do it. And so I kind of got my agent, Marietta Zacher, is Latina. And so I actually queried her with I think it was with this story, but I have another story that has some Spanish incorporated. And she was like, what is your background? She was thinking I was Afro Latina. I was like, no, but I'm from Miami. So
Yes.
that's kind of how I went back and I put the Spanish language in it, because certainly if this family is bicultural, and they have uh, Latinx heritage, Spanish should be incorporated. And so I
Mm-hmm.
felt strongly about that. And even though I didn't do it at the beginning, I thought about it later on. And when I approached my both my agent and my editor, and they were like, absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is how I came to incorporate the Spanish in the text.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you don't have to worry about sort of defining the words within uh, the text because it's very clear what the words mean between
Yes.
the illustrations and the context of what's happening. And even if a child hears a word that they don't know, it's not going to stop them from getting what's happening in the story. So it's very seamless, I think.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
yeah.
also, just like our kids can look up other words that they don't
Sure.
understand,
Yes.
if they're older, they can, Google will tell us what any language word, that we want to find out. We go look it up. And
I'm
for the
sure.
adults, as
Yes.
we're reading it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and this book is very interesting because it's really geared toward the very youngest end of the picture book age. So what you're doing is you are writing, when you're writing for that age, you're writing for the parent as well as the child. It's got to work on both those levels.
Mhm.
Um, and so this story I think does that very well because as it goes along, you know the baby is very busy with the nighttime routine and dropping food on the floor and making funny faces at dad at the table, and it's just a really great bedtime routine. But I love how the text talks directly to the baby. So if you're reading this out loud to a young child, they're hearing the story being told to them.
Yes.
And I think that's so important to remember when writing for this really, really young group because they're not necessarily following a plot. They might not be old enough to do that, but they know this story's about them
Mhm.
just because of the way the text is written. And did that take you a while to kind of get? I mean, was this a hard story to write? Sometimes the shortest ones are the hardest.
Mhm. It actually wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
When I was motivated to write this story, just thinking about my own young motherhood, when I
Mm-hmm.
was parenting babies and,
Mm-hmm.
in that nostalgic feeling that I would get every time that I would think about that. And so one of those times I just said, you know what, I need to capture this in a book. I'm sure I'm not alone and
Sure.
it would just make for a really cool book. And so, I just sat down to write it and I knew I wanted to craft it as like a love letter,
Mm,
to
yes.
the baby.
Yeah.
So no, it actually wasn't hard at all. I tend to write by muse. And
Mm,
so when I actually sit down to write something, I'm really motivated and inspired.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so, yeah, if I spend a lot of time mulling, and sometimes when I'm mulling an idea, if I'm not inspired to sit down and actually write it, then I don't. Or if
mhm.
I try and it's really difficult, I might just say, this is not for me right now. But when I'm in the zone and all the books that I've had published so far, they were the ones that I feel like, the muse gave them to me. And I,
Sure.
yeah, sat down
Mhm.
and it wasn't super difficult.
Great. Well, we're actually, I haven't even talked about the rhyme yet before we move on from this because we're talking about the rhyme scheme for each of your different books.
Mhm,
So this is a fairly even meter. You've got the rhyme at the end of each line, at least the first three lines, and then the fourth line is kind of a refrain that goes throughout the book. So when you're writing for that younger end of the picture book audience, is it important to have a meter that's pretty consistent like this? Or did you even think about that? Is this just the way this particular book came to you?
well, I knew I wanted it as I started to write it. It was going to be a lullaby.
Mm,
And a lullaby has a particular cadence to it,
mm,
right? And it's very simplistic. It's very musical. And there tends to be some, repetition or refrain or something like that. And so that was what I was inspired by, the idea of a lullaby.
mhm,
But to your point, yes, when you are writing for the very young, simplicity is key. Repetition is key because we're teaching. They're learning language. And
mhm,
so you want first of all, you want it to be a story that the parent doesn't mind reading over and over and over again, right?
mhm,
But you want it to also be centered around like day-to-day stuff that they can identify in the illustrations, and then that links back to the words. And
mhm,
so, yeah, all of that stuff is, I think, really important when you're writing for the
mhm.
youngest,
Right.
because we're really building their literacy, their language skills, and all of that.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, and I think that very almost predictable rhythm for
Mhm,
each spread, so we know when the page turn's coming. I that I feel anyway lets the young child kind of anticipate we're going to turn a page soon. Here's my cue, and
mhm,
they start getting involved in the story
Mhm.
in all of those different ways as a young kid. And so the meter is a big part of that
Mhm.
with these this age book. Okay, we're gonna the next one, and this one I really want to hear you read out loud because I love this. My cold plum lemon pie bluesy mood. I think I just have 2 pages from this, so if you could read these, I would love it.
Sure. I'm in a mood, a feeling kind of mood. A being kind of mood is what I'm in. A purple kind of mood. Cold plum eating, grape juice drinking, on the couch bobbing to the beat kind of mood. A purple kind of mood. That's what I'm in. Move. Now I'm headed to a gray kind of place. Storm brewing inside that I hide because I don't want any trouble space. Dark and swelling, looming, gloomy gray kind of place. That's what I'm in.
Okay, so this is when I read that. Well, first I read it in my head, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
just silently. And then I read it out loud. And when I read it out loud, I thought, this is spoken word poetry.
Yes,
It had that rhythm to me. Yes.
yes,
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it has that musicality that the spoken word, which pulls from jazz and hip hop and all of those musical types. It was just wonderful. And it's interesting how that didn't dawn on me until I read it out loud. Yeah, which is, I'm so glad this is a picture book because those are meant to be read out loud. So,
yeah.
so clearly, did
That was
spoken word inspire you for this?
absolutely
Mm-hmm.
spoken word, jazzy feel. And
Mm-hmm.
when it's a book about emotions and moods.
Yes.
And when I figured out really quickly as I sat down to write this, because I was inspired by the phrase in a mood. I'm in a mood
Mhm.
in particular.
Yes.
Um, and so when I sat down and I decided I wanted to write a book not only about emotions, but to marry them with color, just, it just made sense
Mm-hmm.
to make this really like a spoken word, very atmospheric um, kind of you know, verbiage, wording. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I was definitely inspired by spoken word for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, do you have to practice a lot to get good at that at this style?
You know what? The truth is, all of my writing is really informed by music.
Mm-hmm.
My love of music. I'm like the Simon Cowell of music. I'm not really a singer or I don't play an instrument, but I fancy myself fairly good at analyzing and breaking
Mm-hmm.
apart and critiquing it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think all of my writing is really influenced by that. I like to say I write by ear.
Uh-huh.
As some people, do music, they're formally trained and others play by ear. I like to
Mm-hmm.
say I write by ear.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that music and the feeling that music elicits, that's how I approach my writing.
Sure.
And so, with this, again, talking about the mood and the emotions, I just kind of wanted a moody kind of piece and a delivery vehicle, if you will. And for me,
Yeah.
that was spoken word. I guess just being very familiar with spoken word. I think after Amanda Gorman, there's a whole lot of people who are
Yeah.
just becoming familiar with it. But having been familiar with it, it was just something I was able to draw upon and say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think this is the style I want to go for with this.
Yes. Yes. Now, to me, this would be very intimidating. I'd be a little nervous because other kinds of rhyming formats, there are sort of rules, you
Mhm,
know, they have a certain amount of syllables per line or the first and third line rhyme or whatever. There's not really any rules with this type of poetry. So there's a lot of internal rhyme within the lines, not necessarily always on the end of the line. Um, it's still got to work. It's got to flow. It's got to work being read out loud.
mhm.
Did you just revise this like crazy? Did you read it out loud a lot? What was sort of your process when you were creating this?
Um, I think the focus, well, always is the focus is on getting across the idea and the emotion, particularly in a book about moods and emotions. So that's number one. I think reading it aloud, I read this book aloud a lot, probably more than anything else,
Mhm.
because in spoken word, it is so important how the words tumble off the tongue. Um, you can be really creative. This is like free verse on steroids, right? It's so you have a lot of range as far as what you can do with it, but it's an opportunity to employ like all types of literary devices, like the not only the internal rhyme, but the alliteration and a lot of assonance. And so it's a feeling, man. It's just like jazz, it's a feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if you're writing about a subject matter, first of all, if you're not familiar with spoken word and you want to try it, of course, you just got to go read and listen to a lot of it so that you can kind of get the sensibility.
Mhm.
And then, the next important thing is to pick a topic that's really important to you, because that's going to allow you that emotional connection to what you're
Mhm.
working on.
Mhm.
Because emotion is a real important part of, I think, spoken word and doing it well.
Mhm.
So just listen to a lot of other spoken word,
Mhm.
performances, and get a topic that means a lot to you, and as you're writing, say it aloud a lot. It has to have a cadence, some type of rhythm.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that's kind of a place to start if you want to try
Yeah.
to write something
Yeah.
like this.
That's great. Also, when you see it on the page, each line has a very distinct either idea
Hmm.
or image to it. Each line really holds its own.
Hmm.
And I think that's another important component of this type of poetry. And like I said, just by looking at the words on the page, you can really see that. So this particular book also is interesting because you have this, so you're connecting emotions to colors, which was sort of your basic concept,
Hmm.
but then you have this story of the family dynamic going on, which are kind of triggering the different emotions that your main character Jamie is feeling. Um, did you have to give a lot of notes to the illustrator about that, or did the illustrator infer all of that from your words?
Interesting. I didn't look back at my document. I think most of this, if as best I can remember, the illustrator Shane Evans got from the text, between the dialogue and the actual
Mhm.
the poem. I think he was able to not only get what I wanted, he elevated it in many instances. There are some pages I'm like, oh, that's cool the way he did
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so yeah, actually, I think I didn't have a tremendous number of art notes.
Mhm. Okay, that's great. That's
Mhm.
good. That's what you want.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And in the chat box, there was some questions about editing. When you submit a story in rhyme, of course, you're still going to have an editor. Did you have a lot of editing notes on your manuscripts, or were they pretty good to go when the editor got them?
Uh, mhm. I think I'm a type of person that really, once an editor gets my work, it tends to be in pretty good shape. And the
Mhm.
notes that I get are not about rhyme or meter or anything like that. It's more topical. Like, do we need to include a scene here? I don't quite understand this. Like, for example, this book, there's a reference to the street lights coming on. And him
Mhm.
having to be home before the street lights come on. And I think the way I had it originally worded, the editor said, I don't know if kids will really understand what that means, having to be home by the street lights coming on. So in the previous spread, I included the father saying, "Be back before dark,"
Right.
so that the kid, when they saw the streetlights, they could make that connection, stuff like that. But as far as my rhyme is concerned, that's pretty well worked out by the time they
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. We must be the same age because we always had to be home by the time the street lights came on too. That was just like what all the moms told the kids back in the
Yes.
60s and this, it's like that was the marker for dinner time, street lights coming on. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Because we
funny.
could go out then, right? And we could
Yeah, we
just
could go out.
come
We
back
could just,
in.
our moms
Yeah.
were like, go, go, go.
Go, please go.
Just
Don't come
go.
back.
Yeah.
Those street
Don't
lights.
come back till the streetlights come on. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, let's look at your last one here. And again, I would really love it if you would read this out loud. I have, I think, 3 spreads from this one.
Okay. And this is actually my first book.
This is your first
that I
book.
wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Blue sky, no clouds, summer heat, side street, whirling, whizzing feet. Everyone is out to play today around our way. Blading, step dance, double dutch. Football game was way too much. Shrika, Ben, and me, all sweating in the blazing sun. Look, here comes the ice cream man. Holding money in our hands, we chase him down for frozen treats. Quick, lick before it runs. Blue sky, no clouds, time to go. I know I'll see them later, so I head home while they both stay to play around our way. I peek in the barber shop. Uncle Charlie and Grandpa are talking loud and arguing, debating with the men. Running quick to say hello and don't be late before I go. Strolling past the red oak tree, I'm on my way again.
Great. So again, very different
Mhm.
rhyme style for this one. This really reminded me of those playground games, you know, the jump rope chants that we used to do and games like that in the playground, at least when I was a kid. But there's a lot of action. It's these short lines that are full of imagery and those wonderful verbs. So was that a conscious choice with this topic? Tell people a little bit about what this book is about.
Okay. This is basically a young girl's love letter to her multicultural, close-knit community. And they're having a neighborhood celebration for Neighbors Day. They're having like a big block party.
Mhm.
And so that's the context of this story. Actually, my very first version of this story was an ABC book.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, it went, I still remember, I think the first verse was like, A is for the alley where we all learn to skate. B is for the black eyed peas staring from my plate. C is for the corner store I pass most every day. This is how we learn our ABCs around my way. And so that was the framework for it. But it didn't sell in that version. But I got a revision request from an editor who felt like that framework was kind of confining for some reason. And so they asked if I would consider revising in a different framework. And so after a while, this is what I came up with. Again, inspired by music, right? Because I've got a refrain, 2 verses, refrain, 2 verses, refrain.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's what this story was about. Did you have another question? Did I forgot?
No,
Okay.
that's great. So yeah, I just want people to really see the words on the page here and how different they are from the other 2 books. And so the structure of the rhyme really needs to match your story. And again, this is not as tightly metered as Brown Baby Lullaby. It's
Right.
it's
This
it's
is more, I
almost a
think,
free verse.
yeah,
Mhm.
this, yeah, to me is more inspired by kind of like hip hop, rap,
Sure. Mhm.
flavor. And like you said, it elicited childhood memories, growing
Mhm.
up in the big city of Miami, and
Mhm.
just that kind of almost old school vibe, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that that's kind of where I was going with this. And this is a story about city and a young girl going all around her neighborhood and showing us, taking us on a tour, really.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing all kinds of, diverse people and activities. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, there's a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
that I needed to express in the text.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this was the form that I thought I could do it. Even the shifting back and forth between the refrain and a couple of verses and the refrain when the refrain, of course, has a different meter than the two verses. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
energy. Mhm.
It's wonderful. Well, I'm going to stop sharing here so we can keep talking for just a few more minutes here, and then we do have some questions I want to be sure to get to.
Okay.
Um, but I did want to stop a second. So, especially around our way on Neighbors Day, that's, I think you said it's inspired by the Miami neighborhood that you're from. Um, I get questions a lot from people saying, I think I've started too late trying to write for kids. I think I'm too old. I feel like people, there's prejudice in the industry against writers who are over a certain age. You've clearly drawn a lot from your childhood in the stories you're telling,
Mhm.
and yet you found a way to make them completely relatable to kids today. So what do you say to people who are saying, who are using the excuse of I'm too old, to maybe not put themselves out there and actually submit their work to publishers?
I think with age comes a lot of strengths.
Mm-hmm.
You have insight. You have insight into the why of a lot of things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a strength to me. The thing is, how do you communicate that in a way that children will receive? And children of today aren't that different.
Mm-mm.
Again, we're talking about the emotions, the details may be different. They're doing a lot of technology, they have a lot more technology and things of that nature. But when it comes to feelings, we felt sad, they feel sad. We everybody longs for connection in some way. So do
Mm-hmm.
they. And so
Mm-hmm.
tapping into those emotional truths, if you go into story with that, as opposed to like topics, figure out what your heart stories are, and the emotional part of that, and then figure out how to drop it into a story that's timeless. I try to write stories that aren't like grounded in a particular time period. You kind of want it to be timeless, so you don't have to be real. The details that you include, try not to make them too temporal. But I just think that there is so much um, benefit to having some age and experience under your belt, and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It's incumbent upon us to share that. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a good thing. Don't look at it as a bad thing. Yeah, go you. If you got some age under your belt, go you.
That's right. No, I completely agree. And especially with picture books, they do tend to be more timeless, I think,
Yeah.
than say young adult novels. I understand if you feel like you're not quite in touch with today's 16-year-olds, that doesn't mean you can't become in touch.
Exactly. For
But
sure.
if that's not where you feel like going, you can write a timeless picture book that draws from your experience and your age, but has that, those emotions. You're right. That's really the key. That's the foundation of everything. Is
Mhm.
those
And there are
emotions.
people, as far as middle grade and YA is concerned, who, and that's not my space, but I know I've
Mhm.
read, and even in recent times, people publish period books that where
Mhm.
you can draw on
Of course.
your details from where
Mhm.
an earlier time. However, that has to be ancillary, right? Still, the emotional truth is what has to drive the
Absolutely.
story, and kids of today will warm to that for sure.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. Great. Well, I just want to real quick ask you about your two new books under contract, and then we'll take these a couple questions. But
Mhm.
they're just so fascinating to me, and they seem like a bit of a departure to you. Maybe they're not, but do you want to tell us just so you're doing a picture book biography of Shirley
Mhm.
Chisholm, but that's going
Yes.
to be in free verse.
Yes.
It's written in free verse,
It is.
which I love. But so you're working nonfiction into the verse format. Was that more challenging than normal?
Well, this is my first nonfiction book.
Mhm.
So, no, actually, it was more comfortable for
Oh,
me because it's what I write, right?
sure.
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out how to tell this story, um, I said, I got to do it with my voice. I got to do it in my style.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was actually a decision I made to help me be able to enter the story more easily and to tell it because I'm comfortable with that style. I just had to kind of
Hmm.
um, put real stuff in it,
Yep. Yep.
and I had to first I had to figure out what the emotional piece of the story that I wanted to focus on would be. And once I found that, that drove my
Hmm.
poetry.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great. And that's the wonderful thing about nonfiction these days, especially in the picture book arena. You can be so creative with the way you write
Mhm.
um, the factual information, and that's I love that. It just frees up writers so much.
For sure.
So that flag, tell us a little bit about that flag.
Well, that one is my most recent one that I've gotten a
Hmm.
contract on, and it is a story about the Confederate flag and
Hmm.
its impact on society in general, on Black people in particular, and in this case, on a Black child. And so, yeah, as far as how I've written it, structured it, um, I'm not quite sure if it will end up being uh, more traditionally formatted in like more like prose lines, or if I'll add some more line breaks and it'll end up being narrative free verse, because the way I write, even if it's in, full sentences, my goal, I'm always considering the read aloud quality of it. And
Hmm.
so I'm still considering cadence, and really I'm still writing it in a very poetic way. And so it just depends on, am I going to put some line breaks in
Hmm.
it or not? So that's yet to be determined. Right now, it's a little bit of a hybrid. It might stay kind of a hybrid. We'll see.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's that flag. I'm very excited about it. That's a departure for me as
Yeah.
well. I think I've heard it is the only picture book about the Confederate flag from uh, the perspective of it being problematic that has ever been
Hmm.
written. So
Interesting. Well, and I think just judging from the rest of your work, tell me if I'm wrong here, but are you going to be focusing on the emotional impact on the characters of the flag? And that's kind of your way into explaining this to the young kids, right?
absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
that's my thread. That's
Yep.
kind of how I,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Which I think is a great way to go because, you're dealing with a young audience. They might not understand the whole history behind it,
mhm.
but how it makes a friend feel, they can understand that. That's a great way into that topic.
Absolutely. And there is the friendship dynamic to
Hmm.
that story as well. And it will have back matter to it that will
Okay.
allow for further, research and if you will. But yes, that's the way that I feel is most important um to enter the story. It's really what I want to do. I want to express how it makes people feel.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Great. Well, we're really looking forward to both those books.
thank
So
you.
let's get to a couple questions here before
Okay.
I let you go. I appreciate you hanging in here with us. Let's see. Okay, this is a question from someone says, anonymous. I recently presented a rhyming picture book to an agent and a publisher. One of them thought it was good, but the other said there were two syllables more here or there. How imperative is it to have the same number of syllables per line? So one, I assume this was at a conference or something, presented, this book to two people. One said the meter wasn't consistent. Um, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, well, then I mean, it may not have been, agents and editors oftentimes aren't poets, right? So they can't always tell you or diagnose what the issue is, but what they can tell you is that, when they read it, it didn't work for them. And so that's something to pay attention to. It's not about syllables, it's about meter. And like I said, I write by ear. So the way I do, I'm tapping out as I'm reading. That's how I write. Other people will talk about tetrameter and iambic pentameter and all of that. And if that's how you learn it, there are websites out there for you to really kind of get that down. But whatever it takes for you to get it to get it perfected, that's what you should do. And then you should have what I like to do is I have my kids read my stuff, and I have them read it out loud, and I take note of where they stumble and trip up. And if they do, I say, okay, then that's a problem, and I need to, and I've learned that after my first book, I didn't do it as much or as pointedly as I do it now. But yeah, that's a really good way to try to figure out if it's really an issue, or if it was maybe just that one editor that wasn't paying attention.
That's right. It could have just been one person's opinion.
Yeah.
It sounds like if there were two lines that stuck out, that it was a very tightly structured meter, as opposed to like a free verse
Right.
or something that you do that's looser. And so then if a couple lines are longer, it's going
It
to
will
they're
stick
going to
out.
stand out,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that will trip up someone when they're reading it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it also depends very much on the type of poetry you're writing.
Sure.
Free verse, of course, you don't have to have the lines all the same.
Right. But Brown Baby Lullaby, it had to be.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, absolutely. But even with free verse, you've got to have that read aloud rhythm. So
Mhm.
you're not tripping up the reader where all of a sudden they turn the page and the lines are twice as long as they were on the page before. So
It's
you
got to be
still
some
keep yes,
cohesive quality to it all. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think you just answered this question, but Karen asks, were you trained in poetry? Or are you fairly self-taught just from doing your own?
Self-taught by
Mhm.
ear,
Yeah,
lots of reading, lots of picture books to my children over the years was an education in and of itself. And then, like
absolutely.
I said, the music
Hmm.
aspect of it, of my interests, and
Hmm.
yeah.
Great. Roxy asks, can you share a little about your journey to the publication for your first book? Did you submit it to an agent or directly to publishers?
For the first book, I had submitted my ABC book a while, and some other books before that, and none of it had gotten picked up. And so I decided to send to an agent,
Hmm.
because back then, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that you needed an agent. It was like 2007.
Hmm.
So there were still a lot of houses that were open to unsolicited manuscripts. So, but at some point, I wasn't, I wasn't, selling work to them. So I decided to try to acquire an agent, and I did. And I think I sent out about 4 or 5 queries,
Hmm.
and I connected with an agent. And after a year, it took a year for us to sell Around Our Way on Neighbors Day. but we did. Of course, we had that request for me to change the structure and
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately we sold it in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who are new, that's not that unusual
Mhm.
for a
Yeah.
first book,
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
just and so much of it is hitting the right editor at the right time.
Sure.
And you can't always predict what that time will be. So patience
And
is definitely important
yes. And I'll
as a
tell you, with that flag, I wrote it 5 years ago.
hmm,
And when I wrote it, it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't the time for it.
huh,
But
interesting.
this past year it went to auction. So
Yeah.
timing is everything.
Wow. That is very interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Um, I'm going to let you go, but I forgot to mention in your bio the anthology we rise, we resist, we raise our voices. Do you want to just tell us briefly what that is, because we had a question about that in the chat
Okay,
box.
sure. It is a middle grade anthology, and it
Mhm.
is published by Crown, or in
Mhm.
conjunction with Just Us Books and Crown. And it is an inspirational book for kids, helping them to find their voice and encouraging them to be active in the causes that they find, that they're inspired to be, active in.
Mhm.
My particular entry in the book is Where Are the Good People?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was written, I think, Wade and Cheryl Hudson sent out a request to some of us in the industry to answer the question, what, and I can't remember, it's like, what do we tell them? What do we tell our young people? It was in 2016. And there was just so much scary stuff going on. It was like, after the election, his niece, I think, she said something. You could go online, and I know I'm butchering the specifics of it, but she said something that indicated how fearful she was. And he was like, well, what do we tell them to let them know it's going to be okay, and that they
Mhm.
have a voice and that they can use it to make change and positive change. And so he sent the call out, and
Hmm.
some of us, responded with um, poetry and essays and artwork. And that became the book, We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices.
Great, great. Okay, well, there's another one for us all to read for sure. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tameka. This was just wonderful. The chat box is just going crazy with people
Thank you.
just
Thank you.
thanking you for an amazing, inspiring discussion tonight. So I appreciate it, and we're so glad you could be here with us tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Great. And we'll look forward to those two new books coming out from you for sure.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you next week. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.